Hello. Welcome to the Beyond Baba Yaga podcast, where I will attempt to reimagine the crone archetype to take the fear out of living child-free. My name's Josie, and today I am joined by Sam. Hello, Sam.
Hiya.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
Absolute pleasure.
We're going to have a little chat about your experience of a child-free life thus far and my reflections on it as well.
Yes, it's unusual, but I think it's actually becoming more of a norm than people believe.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think people are actively choosing to be child-free rather than necessarily having it imposed upon them. And that's the idea that I thought it would be nice to discuss in the podcast, because I suppose I want to encourage people who might be on the fence to think that a child-free life might be for them. Do you mind if, first of all, we talk a little bit about where you're at right now and what made me want to have a chat with you about this? Because I know you.
Always makes it easier.
I haven't just plucked you off the street. And knowing your position as a young woman in your 30s, looking at getting married quite soon,
Yep.
and knowing that you and your partner have chosen to take permanent steps to prevent having children, I would love to know, what was it that led you to take this kind of definitive action, which is quite unusual?
Yeah, I think it's a rare one, I think, with people our age. We'd had a bit of a discussion about it because, it's one of those things we were together for maybe 18 months before we went for it. I came off my implant shortly afterwards, which was quite nice because it meant I actually got that time to be able to rebalance one's hormones after being on some sort of preventative measure from the time that I was about 16.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it made it quite nice to be able to actually go, do you know what, I can now stop being the person that has to take that responsibility on.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of women have to take on themselves.
Completely.
Because, yeah, otherwise, the guys all do the condom thing, but there's not really anything else for them to do.
Prior to being with him, where had you stood on having kids?
I was always a bit on the fence with it. It was one of those things that I was like, if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. And when I was younger, when I was in my teens, maybe early 20s, I sort of assumed at some point I probably would have a kid. But I think as I got into my later 20s, I just thought, actually, it's not for me. I like the freedom of doing what I want when I want, rather than, I have to keep this thing alive. Which...
Although you're great with plants.
I mean, some plants, not all.
The hardy ones.
The hardy ones I'm great with, but you can't guarantee you're going to get a hardy child.
Absolutely not. No matter how much you sling them out the window and hope they bounce. No guarantees.
And when I moved to London as well, I moved to London in my mid-20s, so I was about 24. They always say that when you're in London, when you grow up there or when you work there or anything like that, and just living there, getting married, buying the house, having the kids, is often pushed 5 to 10 years further down the line, which I think in a way made it a bit easier to go, well, actually, do you know what? It's not really for me, because I don't really want one now. It's so busy and I get to enjoy my life the way that I want.
Yeah.
Which always makes me feel a little bit selfish. I do have that sort of pang sometimes. Maybe I'm just really selfish because I don't want to have someone else ruling my life.
Well, you know what? I think that's one of the problems with the pro-parent narrative, is that having a child is selfless, and not having a child is selfish, just to take it down to basics. But then when I have been thinking about the idea of having and not having children, there is not one reason for having a child that is not selfish. Do you know what I mean? That child doesn't ask to be born.
No.
When a person is making a decision about having a child, it's really only for their own gain.
True.
So it's weird that the kind of cultural narrative is that a person who doesn't have kids might be a selfish person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those sort of weird things, isn't it, that you don't really think about either way. You're like, oh, but I want to have kids and share them, bring them up in the world. And you're like, but
They might not want that.
yeah, and also, we're overpopulated as it is.
Completely. The
So,
world might not want that.
Um,
I think there are a lot of arguments for saying, I'm choosing not to have children because I don't want to impact the environment. I don't want to put a strain on public services, whatever, which actually, in reality, is a less selfish thing to do in terms of society. So you had already got to the point of feeling like you didn't want kids before you got together with Rich.
Yeah.
Before you'd even started having your conversations. So at the point where you guys were so far into a relationship that it kind of came up, did you at any point between you do a pros and cons type list?
No, we didn't really, because I think we were both quite decided by that point that we didn't want kids. I think because we're so used to our lives the way they are, even when I speak to parents, to see what might be a pro, some of them really struggle. And I mean, I know that they love their kids and they wouldn't do anything to not have them.
Completely.
But I think even a parent would struggle to come up with a pro-con list for having kids versus not having them.
I've got this belief that at the point where you have kids, something happens both chemically and psychologically where you're then almost brainwashed into believing it's the best thing, because you have to be.
Yeah, true.
Because you're about to go on this massive journey for certainly 18 years, potentially the rest of your life. You have to be all in and think this is the best route, because the alternative can't even be considered.
Yeah.
And in my very, very cynical inner self, I think if there was a anonymous survey where you said to people, if we could magically give you a life where you hadn't had kids or you had, I think a lot would choose the one where they maybe hadn't, because the change is so massively different. And like you say, the enjoyment of having a thriving life together in a relationship and alone is sort of sabotaged straight away.
Yes, they do seem to just take over everything. Although I'm sure they also bring a lot of joy to people's lives, and I do firmly believe if people want to have kids, then go for it. If you've got the means to look after them and then want to do it.
Completely.
Rather
you than me.
Basically, yes. I think with Rich as well, though, he's got his core friend group are all childless. They've all opted to basically have dogs instead of children.
Which that helps.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, you've still got that bit where you get to give your love to something, but which doesn't usually run around screaming with jam on their hands trying to paint the walls.
Yeah. Or ask, why? Are
we there yet?
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, unless you've got a very special dog, you don't have to worry about all the talking incessantly. So do you think that you have experienced pressure from family, friends, society to have kids? But I suppose what you're sort of saying there is actually from a friend's point of view, because a lot of the people have opted not to and have gone the dog route instead. Maybe not.
I don't think we've ever had loads of pressure. The majority of Rich friends are childless. My friends have only recently started having kids, sort of in their mid to late 30s. But I'm not sure all of them are going to go down that route. I think it's becoming a lot more popular amongst people my age to not have children. My mum, I know for a fact, would love grandchildren.
Yeah.
And when I told her that I wasn't going to be having children, she did do that, disappointed dog eye. But why? Can I not convince you?
Yeah.
But she would never force me to do something I don't want to do. Or even ask me to do something that I don't feel comfortable doing. So she's been very understanding with it while still going, I'd love to have grandchildren.
Yeah.
But then my reasoning to her is, she's got a son and 2 other daughters.
Exactly.
And I would love to be an aunt.
Yes.
I don't want to be a mum, but I'd like the idea of being an aunt that I can hop them up on sugar, give them the noisy toys, send them back to the parents, and
completely.
I mean, I'm not sure I'd be the best aunt.
Oh, no, no, no.
I think it might cause arguments between me and my siblings, but
But you get the best
I will love it.
experience. Completely. And I thoroughly agree. I have a brand new niece. Well, she's a couple of months old now. And the joy of being with her and what I can subject both her and her parents to over the years, because they kind of have no choice because I'm that aunt.
yeah.
I'm looking forward to that in a way that, yes, because there's choice involved and there's time limited.
And when they're screaming, you can hand them back to their parents. You don't have to deal with it. You can go, here you go, and I'm going out for a coffee.
Completely. And almost at the first point, when her face starts to change, then I'm like, this has been great. We're done here. Thank you. I'm going to get another gin and tonic. So it's interesting, actually, that you mention your mum, because I have had the same thing with my mum. My mum would make an amazing grandma and would have absolutely loved me to have children. And I feel, again, it's one of these weird things. When I was thinking about the possible reasons for me to have children at the time when I was thinking about it as almost like it's now or never.
Yeah.
I think I only had 3 or 4 decent reasons to. And one of them was it would make my mum so happy.
Yeah.
Which, of course, I want to do. But it's a massive thing to do that might not be right for me.
Just to make someone else happy.
Her. And that, again, I suppose, feeds into this weird thing of making a decision. Yes, I feel selfish there. I feel like I'm being selfish towards my mum.
Yeah.
But when I'm able to then take my emotional brain off and put my rational brain in, it's like that does not make sense. I can't bring a new life into this world so that my mother can spend one weekend with it a month or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Even though it may compromise my life, my relationship. But I think a lot of people do feel that pressure as well, and do feel like it's part of the process of, I love my parents, I want them to be grandparents, so I do this as a gift to them.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel it from their parents, because I think when my mum was younger, that's what society told you to do. You got married, you had your kids. If you had a career, great, but at that point it wasn't really necessary because, you're married and you've got your kids to look after. So that's just what it is. I mean, my mum was pretty much a single mum most of my childhood. And she still worked and everything because she had to, but I think she would have wanted to regardless.
Yeah.
And she did an amazing job with us. And I don't think she would really change any of that. Even when I was a kid, there was that thought of the way society should be. And you still have that, go to school, go to university, get married, have kids, buy a home.
Completely.
It's like the steps of life.
The tick list.
Yeah. But I think now it's sort of becoming less of a thing. I think people are opening up to the idea that actually society's tick list doesn't quite work.
It's not a one size fits all for everybody, and that's good. It's good to move away from that. But you're right. It's funny, isn't it? It's almost like back in the day, I think, when a woman's role was to be a mother and homemaker. In a way, it felt like there was less pressure than now, where feminism, which has come along and said, actually, you could go and have a career, be an individual, but still society says, could you also please get married and have kids as well? Could you kind of do it all?
Right? Knowing my mum could do everything, it does also put that thing in your head of like, well, maybe I could do everything. So when I was in my 20s thinking about having kids, it was like, my mum could do it all, and she did it brilliantly. It's like my mum, I think, raised, all in all, 4 lovely children, but 3 of us for a good chunk of our lives on our own. With she very luckily had her parents were there to help. Like when we moved from Basingstoke to Devon, they basically moved with us so that they were always on hand if she needed them. Yeah, which was also then great for us because it meant we always had our grandparents around.
Completely.
But I just don't think that I've got that same mentality to be able to, or to want to do it all. I want to just do what I'm comfortable with and that is having my career
Yeah,
and quite honestly going on holiday when I want to.
completely. And just doing whatever I want, whenever I want.
Basically, yeah.
Eating what I want, enjoying what I like,
Yeah.
watching what I want on TV,
Oh, yes.
living in the way I want to.
Sleeping in on a Saturday.
Completely. All those
Going
luxuries.
out for dinner without having to either take the kids with you or find a babysitter.
Yeah. And it's interesting, actually. I wonder, obviously we'd never know, but I wonder how feasible it would have been for your mum to have done that had your grandparents not been involved. Because when I think about something like that, I've got friends who are single parents and they don't have grandparents they don't have their parents nearby because they've done a geographical for their job or whatever. And they end up almost working to pay for the childcare.
Yeah.
And single parents and parents where they're both together but they're still both having to work because, you know, life is so expensive now. And that would just be crazy. I can't imagine having kids and then working my job to just pay for the children to be at the nursery.
Yeah, it's insane. One of my friends is currently, so she's just had a little boy about 2 months ago, and she lives in London, but she's already talking about the potential thing that they'll have to sell their flat and move further out so that they can actually afford to pay for the mortgage on their house, the child, and then eventually daycare when it comes to having to put the child into daycare so that she can go back to doing her job, and her husband works full time. So and I've had another friend who basically gave up her job because it was cheaper to give up her job and be a full-time mum than it was to go back to work and pay for childcare instead.
Which is depressing in a way, isn't it? Because for your friend, I mean, maybe your friend didn't like her job, I don't know, but I'd hate someone to feel like they couldn't go back to work if actually they needed that just for the mental stimulation, because a woman is so much more than a mother, and quite often we need to be growing and progressing for our self-esteem, you know, just feeling like we're in the world of work if we want to be. But then something like that, it's almost like, no, it just doesn't fit, actually.
I do find it a bit crazy still that people have found that actually giving up what your job currently is cheaper than or better value to do that than to pay for childcare.
Completely.
I don't quite understand how childcare has become so expensive for people.
I know. It feels like it's got completely disproportionate now, hasn't it? It's like you have to be earning an awful lot of money to be able to make it work, which obviously most people just aren't. You know, most of us are just doing fairly standard jobs.
Regular jobs.
So you've alluded to it already with talking about how much you enjoy your career and how much of a focus that is for you, and also how much you enjoy things like going on holiday. So when you look at your friends who have had kids and your own life, I mean, this is completely a leading question, but I wonder, how do you think your quality of life and their quality of life, out of the people you know who have kids and who don't, who's happier on the whole, do you think?
I think it's sort of a difficult one, because I think, so my friend who had her little boy a couple of months ago said might potentially have to sell her flat to find a cheaper place. She's probably just as happy as I am. She's wanted kids for years. Like, this has been something that she has always wanted since I've known her. So I think for her, she gets no sleep, and she says her boobs hurt because of the feeding. But I don't think she would change that for the world. I think
her dreams come true.
Yeah, and I think even though, you know, she's worried about money, especially she works in the same industry that we're in, so she's in TV and film. And as we know at the moment, it's in a bit of a slump, which means that a lot of people haven't got jobs. So she was freelancing before she had a little one, and she's hoping that the industry will pick back up when she comes off her maternity leave. But I think even with all of that, I think that it's what she wanted, so she will be ecstatic about the whole thing. Whereas personally, I think, you know, I'm really happy in my life because I don't have to worry about any of that. Myself and Rich are quite comfortable. Like, you know, we don't earn big bucks, but we're in a very fortunate position that we own our house. We're paying off the mortgage and whatever, as you know, a lot of people do these days. But if we want to be able to go on holiday, or, you know, with the wedding coming up and stuff, we know that we've got the money to be able to sort of do all that stuff without really having to scrimp and save or panic or worry about any of it. It's like,
Yeah.
I think it's difficult because I think what people want from their lives can be very different, and what brings
Yes.
people joy in their lives is very different. For me, it's being able to sleep in till 10 and then watch crap TV in bed till 12 on a Saturday before I even remotely think about the idea of getting out and doing something.
Completely.
The idea of being up at 5 in the morning with someone screaming at me for breakfast doesn't appeal. But for some people, that might be their idea of a dream Saturday morning, is being able to get up and take their kids to football or ballet practice or something. But yeah, I think it's different things bring people joy. And
Yes.
so yeah, I think it's quite hard to compare whether someone with kids has a better quality of life than somebody without.
And thank you for mentioning that we do work in TV and film, because I have a very leading question for you. As a kind of caveat to this, I have worked with a lot of kids for a lot of families for many years as a side gig, and I have witnessed how much people use the TV as I think a form of childcare. And I'd be interested to know what your perspective is. I mean, you're an online editor, you work in TV and film every day, it's a career that you love. I mean, we make a lot of natural history TV shows, which aren't necessarily what parents are putting on screens.
Maybe it should be, though.
It should be for their kids to watch. But I feel like I've witnessed a lot of kids with access to phones and iPads and the TV as a way for the parents to not be so actively involved in parenting. Something that the kids love, they become completely engaged and absorbed. And yes, it's not usually natural history. And even like a lot of YouTube now, I often see like toddlers watching YouTube, which for me is just a complete head fry. Do you think that people would be more reluctant to have children if they didn't have access to screens as a form of parenting and childcare?
I mean, it's an interesting thought. I think the one which gets me more is when you're out in a park and the parent is paying no attention to the child because they're staring at their mobile phone instead. And I find that a bit like, your child is like running over there. Do you not want to make sure that they're not like about to run off a cliff?
Yeah, that's depressing, actually, seeing
Yeah,
that.
but I suppose in a way, if screens would become obsolete, maybe they would spend more time with the child, whichever way round it went. But I mean, I grew up in the countryside. I lived in a little village of 10 houses, and it was before phones and stuff were really a thing. We used to go outside and play a lot more, which I don't feel is quite as big a thing anymore. Kids these days are given PlayStations or Xboxes and they sit and play video games and stuff or whatever inside the house, and it is upsetting to see. I don't know whether if screens disappeared, whether people would be more reluctant to have a child, because I think they probably wanted the kid. It was just that, you know, regardless of what the parenting techniques are to calm your child down, I think that they still would have them if they really wanted them. But it would be nice to see people a bit more engaged with their children when you're out and about, rather than staring at your mobile phone all day.
Sam, what if your biological clock starts ticking at 40? Do you think there's a chance of that happening?
I don't think so. I mean, you never know. It's only a few years away now, terrifyingly. But
Don't worry, it's not that bad.
But no, I don't think I'll ever really change my mind on it. I mean, me and Rich are currently planning to do a 2 to 3 month trip to America for our 40th, which we would never be able to do if we had children.
Absolutely not.
And I would much rather do something like that and be able to do that without having to worry about, you know, spending the extra $3,000 to take my child along.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't think it'll ever change, you know, unless my mum sits there and really goes, no, you must do it now. But again, I don't think she'd do that. I think she'll start just harassing the younger sisters for that one.
Exactly. You suddenly, yes, you move into the next era and she can focus her attention on them.
I think it will make me safe in 4 years' time. Mum will just go, oh well.
Yeah.
I like my life as it is.
Completely. Well, talking about the prospect of your career that's blossoming and your wedding that's coming up and a multiple week trip to America, there's plenty of amazing stuff on the cards.
Yes, we're very looking forward to it all, I think.
Yeah, without having something else complicating things.
Basically.
Oh, Sam, thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
It's been my absolute pleasure.
It's been really wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much to Sharon for recording and producing this. And I've been Josie. This is the Beyond Baba Yaga podcast.